pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Any questions about the agenda?
I'll make a motion, we approve the agenda.
Second.
Motion's been made and seconded to approve the agenda as it's presented. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. Consent agenda is the next item.
I just have one question on the accounts payable, and I'm sure we're gonna bring this up more than once, but the fence for the property around Randy Kupish's for $1,500, is that going to be something that we might be able to recoup?
He is gonna pay for that.
Okay,
Yep. We will invoice him.
thank you. That's all I had.
Move to approve the consent agenda.
I'll second.
Motion's been made and seconded to approve the consent agenda as it's presented. Any other questions or comments? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. Third item is Main Street Reconstruction Project update. Chris?
Thank you. Okay, well, first item here is resolution directing modification of the construction contract, specifically change order number 26. This one is pretty straightforward, why this needed to be done. If you're familiar with the what we call the rapid rectangular flashing beacons, which is basically like what we have out here at Central and then down by the park. The way they were designed is one, it was on a standalone pedestal. The second was to be mounted to a light. And again, basically after looking at what all was going to be on the lights and concerns about having more added onto it, it was decided it was really in the best interest of the city to have it on a separate pole, the second set of signs. So each crossing was going to be one on pole, one on a light pole. So we chose to have them add the extra bases and poles. And so this is to cover that cost. And this will be paid for out of that federal aid, state aid fund. So again, it's that part of that grant that we're still working on. And we still have not even exceeded our original quantity on that. So I guess any questions? Pretty straightforward.
Questions? Entertain a motion to approve the resolution.
So moved.
Is there a second?
I'll second.
Motion's been made and seconded to approve resolution 2111-1501. Any other comments or questions? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. Next item.
Okay, the next item I have here is regarding the Columbus Avenue, CSAH, County State Aid Highway 15, or what we're also referring to as the 2022 Capital Improvements Project. So where we're at right now is the feasibility study has been completed. I believe you probably received a copy of it on Friday. So it's completed, and again, the report outlines the scope of the project, the probable cost, and then the proposed funding for the project, as well as the estimated amounts of assessments. I'm not going to go into the report in detail, just maybe point out a few highlights. You've got a location map there. Figure number 1, again, if there's any question on the scope of this, this is the stretch from Main Street down here on the south end all the way up to 12th Street up by the high school. So it's a 1 mile section. The first 4 blocks between Main Street and 4th Street will be a complete total reconstruction, replacement of all the underground utilities. They're all aged, old clay, old cast iron water main, et cetera, that need to be replaced. From 4th Street north, there is not any sanitary sewer. Those are fed from other locations. There is water main, but it's newer water main. Ductile iron doesn't need to be replaced, with the possible exception of a segment between 4th Street and 7th Street that we're investigating further. Right now, we've estimated cost for it to be replaced. We're working with Bruce and the Water Department to just verify and confirm, and it may be excluded in the final plans replacement of that. Obviously, some of the background, just a reminder, this is actually a county road, and this is proposed as a turnback. As we recall, we talked about this a couple months ago. And in fact, we would be bringing back the turnback agreement at the December 6th meeting, which would be following the public hearing. A real couple quick things. Street widths, just a little bit some curiosity on street widths. The old section, the first 4 blocks between Main Street and 4th, they're currently at 36 feet wide, and that actually has to be widened at least to 38, probably to 40 if we can get everything to fit, and that's to meet what we call state aid standards. Even though we're not going through state aid for funding on this, it will be a state aid road in the future, and we want to make sure it's brought up to their standards. And that's to allow parking on both sides and accommodate that type of traffic. Point out, we met with the school district, Craig Most from the school district, and we're going to be looking at a enhanced crossing up at Heritage Trail up in the north end there. It's noted again on the location map. We haven't met specifically with St. Wentz yet, but we'll be meeting with them as well as Mayo, and there may be some things we want to look at again with crossings, pedestrian crossings as part of this project as well. Street lights, the utility is planning to replace all the street lights on Columbus, and we factored in that cost on that. I think the utility is planning to provide the labor, but the material costs will be included with the project. Point out schedule, it's actually on page 8 of your report. Just to point out where we're looking at the public hearing, down about a third of the way down. The proposed public hearing would be on December 6th is what we're proposing. At that point, we are assuming we'd proceed into final design plans, and we'd come back to the council on February 22nd, and we'd look at advertising and opening bids in March, and approving probably an award of contract in April. The schedule for construction on this project, though, we'd be looking at doing it between school out and school start. So basically that late May to late August be squeezed in that time. And for this type of work, the size of this project, that's a non-issue. So. Last but not least, the other thing I want to point out is if you go to the Appendix B, that's regarding the assessments. The first sheet is the map, kind of policy map, but the second one is the one I want to point out. And these are what we're calling the draft or recommended assessment rates for the 2022 project. And these were basically calculated using the assessment rates from Main Street in some cases, or the 2019 project, which was the 2019 project had a full depth reclamation section, which is similar to what we're going to do from 4th up to 12th. So basically took those rates and just factored them by inflation forward. That was it. Nothing sophisticated, with the idea again that the property owners in 2022 are paying the same amount as the basically property owners this year in Main Street or property owners in 2019 on County Road 37. I guess that's really, those are kind of the highlights I point out. I'll probably have a little bit more in-depth presentation at the public hearing for anybody that wasn't at our neighborhood meeting. Get into just a little bit more specific details, but I guess with that, any questions?
Yes, I have one. Will if you're gonna increase the width, will that make it so that you put the new sidewalks in and it'll be concrete from there on down into the street?
the circumstances are a little different in different areas along that four block stretch. There's gonna be some segments of sidewalk which will be right behind the curb, because there really is no option because of where the right-of-way falls. Ideally, we always have a good grass boulevard and then sidewalk, and that way there's a place for the snow storage to be. It's easier for everybody to clear it, but there are some areas where we won't be able to do that. I know along St. Wen's, for example, that will be all sidewalk from behind the back of the curb, because that's where, school buses are picking up and dropping off, et cetera. So that'll definitely be all concrete.
Cause that's where I was going with it. Right now, we got on Main Street, we've got the state that does snow removal. So if you increase the width of the Columbus, there's no place to put that snow.
Yeah, no, that's the challenge. And again, ideally, we'll have grass boulevard where it's feasible. Where it's not, we won't. And it's generally in those areas where there's drop-offs. And it's probably not different from what it is out there now. If you happen to see where there's grass boulevard and where there's not, it's probably gonna be very similar to that in the next stage.
Sounds good. That road needs it big time, so.
I'll go next unless someone else wants to.
I have a question, but go ahead.
Okay, I've got a few. Can you just walk through the logical progression to show that it's necessary? You've determined that it was necessary, and what are the elevator description? So if someone asks me why is it necessary, what's the answer I should give them?
Okay, well, number one, the part that everybody doesn't see is the underground utilities. Those are an imminent, they're gonna continue to deteriorate, and there will be some failure at some point. So those utilities need to be replaced. We have old clay where we get, clear water infiltration, which adds cost to the water treatment and things like that. We're gonna have water main breaks, things like that will continue to happen. And obviously that pavement is deteriorated to a point where it needs complete replacement. So putting a new road on top of those utilities is just, it's not in anybody's best interest to do that.
Okay, then what demarks the stoppage for where it's full and then it's just reclaimed? Is there no utilities going down the hill,
Yeah.
or is that the end of the? Why is that there?
That's a good question. So with the exception of some storm sewer, there is no utilities, let me rephrase that. From 4th Street to 7th Street, there is a water main in the road. That's the only thing,
I'm sorry, where is that, Mark? What street does it end at now?
yeah, so if you go to your location map, and if you look, you can see from the hatching here, from 4th Street to 7th Street, there is water main in the roadway. If you look, figure 1 on the location map. So from 4th Street to 7th Street, there is water main in the road, but that is still questionable of whether we're replacing that or not.
Okay,
We've included it as an estimated cost, but we think in the final design that will come out. I didn't want to abandon that at this time yet. There's also some storm sewer in the roadway that's in fair to good condition, and other than some maintenance on the catch basin structures, those generally don't need to be replaced. From 7th to 12th, there are no utilities except for storm sewer in the roadway, and even some of those are actually back behind the curb. The curb in all that stretch from 4th to 12th is in really good shape. There's not much that needs to be removed and replaced. So it's an investment that was made. It's in great shape. There's a good base. The only thing is the pavement is gone. That pavement needs to be replaced. So when we call it full depth reclamation, which pulverizes the pavement and the gravel, mixes it all up. You remove the excess and you put two brand new lifts of blacktop on top. So you replace the pavement. And so that will perpetuate the life of this pavement for a long time. It'll get into a regular maintenance routine of being seal coated a year later. And again, to perpetuate the life of that roadway. So no need to reinvest in the sub base, gravel base and all that. We just need to replace the pavement.
so when you say that the water might be replaced from 4th Street north, does that mean that area will turn into a full reconstruction area then? Or is that kind of a gray area?
If we need to replace it, and again, I think we're leaning towards not, and I'll explain reason why or what the direction we're looking. We would do what we call a trench pavement, so there would be, they would just remove a portion of the pavement to dig the trench.
Okay,
and then place the gravel back, probably the recycled aggregate back, and then come back through and mix up that gravel so that it's uniform. So they wouldn't need to dig up the whole roadway, just a trench pavement to put in the water main.
would that be decided before the next hearing or when it's opened?
No, it will be part of the final design. It's not really affecting any properties. And no property owners.
Isn't the apartment building there on there, or?
They're actually fed from the backside.
Oh,
So there's a water hydrant up there. So to explain how it was explained in the report and where I think we're going with this is again, the water main is newer than all this water main down between Main and Fourth. So, yeah, it's newer, it generally is in better condition. Bruce and the utility have a little bit of concerns about it, but they haven't necessarily had problems with it. What we have looked at, and there's no property served by it. You got a cemetery on one side, you got a vacant property on the other that's on a corner that could be served from another direction. We've actually modeled if that main was just left in place, or if we actually took it completely out of service. We've modeled how it would affect the whole distribution system, and it has zero impact on it. So the theory we're thinking is rather than invest in it now when it's really not needed, let's leave it in service. If it becomes a problem, then we just shut off valves and take that main out of service instead of reinvesting in it at this time because it's not needed for the distribution system.
okay. Are there access points being eliminated or driveways?
No, not like MnDOT. There's nothing here that's affecting people on a permanent basis, only during construction, so.
And I think you've already maybe addressed this comment, I guess, is I don't have any necessarily concern in that the area north, the areas on each side of that road are very low swamp. And so I just think that, gosh, is the road in the best possible shape before we take it over? But given all that low land on each side and I don't know if that road is sunk since it was created. I don't know if you test that or you check that or.
They did. The county went through and verified pavement thicknesses and aggregate base thicknesses under the road, and it was very thick. They had a very good aggregate base below the pavement, and the biggest teller of what's going on there is looking at the curb, and the curb is in great shape. I haven't actually seen that length of a stretch of road that hasn't been that good a shape when we actually come in to do this type of improvement. If you look at what we did in 2019, we probably had 10% of the curb that we ended up replacing. Here we're going to have probably less than 1%. I mean, it's very minimal. So that's telling us it's holding up well in terms of the base.
I don't have any recollection, but I don't remember if that ball field gets flooded ever or if does that ever get that much water? I mean, in the last.
Well, 3 or 4 times since I've been here in 20 years that road has actually flooded, where we had to close off part of that road for a couple hours just for the wetlands to catch up. But
That was like 5-inch rain event
yeah, they
type
gotta be
thing.
heavy, that 5+ inch rainfalls that happen within a couple hours. But no, normally it's not an issue. And that field's a little higher than the lowest point of that street, so
Okay.
that field's not even standing water.
Well, I just want to make sure that we're considering that just because the way the property lays out, that this is our chance to do something if we have any leverage to do it, as I understand it, so. And then my last question is just to understand what effect on the general fund, on the funding
Zero.
program. So nothing?
Yeah, because if you, thanks. I must have skipped that line. Yeah, if you look on page 7 of the report. No, I must have skipped right over costs. I must have missed it on here. So I summarized the cost by different types of improvements there on page 7. Again, total estimated cost of the project. This is everything, including construction as well as administrative, legal, fiscal, and engineering. Estimated at $2.4 million. The funding is through the utilities, for the specific utilities. For the stormwater, basically the stormwater costs are they have to be split 50-50 with the county. Assessments are contributing where there's basically the portions of the project that need to be funded by, that are not funded by the county. And then the county funding basically is covering the rest of it, so there's zero impact on the general fund.
And if there would happen to be any, then I'm sure SEH would probably want to pay it.
Probably pick up the, I'll make sure that doesn't happen.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Other questions?
I had one that was related to yours. I was just kind of, the turnback is, when is that exactly gonna happen?
Well, I'm hoping it will actually be official at the end of this year. And the reason I say that is we will have benefit next year in funding if that can go through. I don't know at this time of the year if that will happen that quick or not. I need to check with the county on that, and I'll certainly have an answer
Okay.
before the 6th.
And the reason I was gonna ask that is I wanted to make sure it was gonna be like County Road 37 when we took that back, that the county was paying half the cost, but I got that answered
Yeah.
right there,
Yeah,
so.
they're covering all their costs, and then the reason, again, I want to hopefully get it turned back this year is because through the state aid calculation system, we'll get more revenue in 2022 because it's under our jurisdiction by the end of this year.
Okay. And then the other question I had, so the timeline, I know that I'd heard this from other guys that were in construction, in regards to the Main Street project. The bid opening at the end of March, isn't that a little late? Aren't most of those schedules, those construction companies already have their
No,
plan?
if it was a big project,
Yeah.
I would say that would be a concern. Actually, a smaller project like this, you kind of want to, you don't want to be too early. You want to be, you know, kind of, I don't know, you never know where the sweet spot is every year, but you don't want to be too early with the smaller projects.
Okay,
And given this is mostly a paving project, and, yeah, I don't see an issue with that. Obviously, we need time to prepare the plan, so that's part of the schedule there too, so.
right. Well, I guess my concern is that, you know, we want this completed between May and August, you know, so it doesn't interfere with the school traffic and whatnot. And I'd hate to see that timeline be missed, you know, because of the bid was going out later than,
Well, and most of our projects in the past, with the exception of Main Street, have all been bid about this timeframe.
They have.
About the March timeframe, award in April, and that gives them a good 2 months of prep before they mobilize and actually start the work. So they get it on their docket, they get it in their plan, they know it's coming up, and they can plan and bid accordingly on other stuff, so.
okay. And I don't know, you'd know better than I mean, are construction companies facing the staffing shortages that everybody else is? So will that, maybe it would be better if we got out there a little early so these guys could plan and hire, so we make that timeline? I guess my concern is that if we don't complete it in August, that's gonna be horrible for the students and the buses
Yeah,
and the.
well, to put this in a frame of reference, yeah, if you look at the size of the 2019 project, which we did have some issues a little late in the year, we had a lot of rain and stuff, we had, they were wrapping some stuff wrapping some things up late, right after school started, having to coordinate with the school. But if you look at the size of that project compared to this, that was much bigger.
Okay.
Even with this 4 blocks of reconstruct, that doesn't take them that long to nail that out, and the rest of it's just paving, so that'll go, you know, the paving of, you know, 4th up to 12th, they'll do that in 2 different days, so.
Okay. So then the other question, the baseball field on the corner of 7th and Columbus there, that gets a lot of traffic, you know, with parents parking down Columbus and down 7th, especially when there's tournaments and whatnot. How is that ball field still gonna be able to be
Yeah, well, again, if
used
you
during
look,
that time?
yeah, oh yeah, I mean, first of all, 7th will be open right through, not an issue there. But there'll be a period of time, you know, when specific work's happening where we're not gonna want traffic on Columbus, but I mean, there'll be
Right.
probably the majority of the time, that will be a non-issue. Traffic can use it, or the people can park there and things like that. Just because the amount of work on Columbus is not gonna be extensive. It's, there'll be some storm sewer repairs, And then there'll be a period of time they're gonna reclaim and grind up the road, and we're definitely avoiding what issue we had on Seventh, on County Road 37, where there'll be a very narrow window where they'll go from reclaimed to paved. And frankly, we just won't have the type of traffic we had on County Road 37. If you recall, we had some of the dust issues and things like that.
Right.
That were, just because it had to be used by the public. You know, most of this road doesn't have to be used by the public. They can be detoured elsewhere and come in from different angle, directions.
Okay.
Yeah. And I think, Sean, too, they can probably use the middle school parking
Oh, I'm sure.
and just walk across.
Well, it was more of some safety issues too, because I know a lot of those kids bike up there early and whatnot, and if I don't know how much construction work's gonna be, it doesn't sound like it's gonna be quite as, well, it won't be as intensive as Main Street was with as many stuff and big things, big machinery, but I was just thinking more if they're trying to bike from the neighborhoods over to that ball field, and they have to encounter that, just what.
Yeah, again, we're gonna, ideally we keep people off Columbus, but everything from east and west coming on Seventh is gonna be open. The trail will still generally be open, except for there'll be some curb apron or pedestrian apron work done on the ends up by the school. Otherwise, again, most of the trail's gonna be open and undisturbed and things like that.
That was it. Those were the questions I had.
No, I don't have any questions, but I'll go ahead and make a motion to.
I'd actually got one more.
Oh, sorry,
This-
Rick.
This area here where the, you intend on taking it up, those sidewalks are for sure gonna be done?
There won't, yes, absolutely. So,
And the mill and overlay area there, is that all gonna be re-sidewalk?
the mill and overlay area, no, it does, there's an existing trail on the west side of Columbus. That will be left in place. We will actually be doing some ped apron improvements to make sure they're brought into ADA compliance. And then we'll also be working with the school to formalize an enhanced crossing at Heritage. So to make sure we got good ped ramps on both sides and a connection into their sidewalk. So we're not adding sidewalks, so to speak, where it doesn't exist, with the exception, I should say, there is a couple little missing segments. I think like across from Mayo, kind of in that stretch between Second and Fourth, there's a few spots where there is some missing segments of walk that we'll be looking to fill those gaps. And they are on the comprehensive sidewalk plan, so we're following that as a guide.
But the ones that are, you're reconstructing that sidewalk on the, which would be on the west side, it's horrible. That's,
Yeah, if it's not ADA compliant today, it's gonna be replaced.
all right, thank
And
you.
I don't think there's anything we can save, so.
Do you have any other questions, Rick? Okay,
Thank you.
I'll go ahead and make a motion to accept Resolution 21-11-1502, receiving report and calling of the public hearing on the improvement.
Second.
Motion's been made and second. Any other questions or comments or concerns? All those in favor say aye.
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 Opposed? Motion passed. Thank you.
Thank you, Chris.
I believe at this time we have the public, or portion where the public is invited to be heard. If there's any matters that the public would like to speak to the council about. If so, please come to the podium, state your name and your address. Anyone interested in addressing the council tonight? Moving on. Number 10, I think, resolution ordering the abatement of hazardous property, et cetera. Josh, you taking that? Ken?
Yep, I'm actually gonna take this one. So I don't have any fancy displays or anything for you here tonight, but we do have a resolution for the ordering of the abatement of a hazardous building located at 703 Second Street Northeast. This is a residential rental property that has significant health and safety concerns at the building. We had done an inspection on October 28th with the police department. Being present, Sergeant Applin and Detective Spicer specifically, along with our building official, Chad Lunder. This was at the urging of the Scott County Social Services due to an issue with children that had been living there. And upon entering the home, we had numerous issues that we had found. Number one being a cockroach infestation, inoperable heating system, excessive amounts of refuse, and the building was immediately posted. Actually took, that was late in the day, so it ended up being the next day we posted it as uninhabitable. Since that time, we've been in contact with the city attorney's office, and actually Scott Riggs is on the go-to meeting here tonight if you have any questions from a legal perspective. But we worked with the city attorney's office to draft the order here tonight. And the reason that this is already raised to this level is we've really not had any cleanup occurring of the property, and the severity of the infestation and other situations we have going on there. It is a public health situation where it isn't a matter of just having, you know, the landlord or the tenant clean this up. This is needing professionals and really needing to protect the adjacent properties from having the cockroach infestation spread to neighboring properties if it's not done correctly. And really at the point with the home that we believe, and this will be determined when they get professionals in there to take a look at the infestation, if it needs to be stripped to the studs, possibly, and then basically rebuilt at that point. So in the resolution that we have tonight in front of you, it allows staff to continue with the city attorney's lead to prepare. It's actually the attachment to the resolution to prepare the abatement order itself. That is ultimately a item that is filed in the district court, and that gives 30 days to the property owner to prepare on page B2 as they're outlined, 7 different items of correction within that 30-day time period. Otherwise, city can fulfill those abatements, or in the alternative, have the home demolished at that point. So again, we are also working with Scott County Public Health. They have also declared the property a public hazard and a public nuisance as well. It is unfortunate that they have to reach this level of situation, you know, without any intermediating inspections, but that is where we're at with our renter registration ordinance at this point that does not provide for inspections. So with that, I don't know if, can you pull up the go-to meeting, Mitch? I don't know if you have any questions for Scott Riggs, but very similar to the action that we had taken at the building at 102 East Main Street this summer. That one was a little different because we had some coordinating efforts with the building owner in that particular situation. But in this one, it needs to be cleaned up or demolished. I mean, there really is no other option here. So I don't know if you have any questions for me or Scott, if you have anything to add additionally on top of that.
I actually do not. Thank you, Ken, and good evening, Mayor and Council. But no, I don't. You covered it pretty well. Typically these resolutions and the attached order, which is Exhibit B, are pretty self-explanatory of what needs to be done. And that's what we're requesting you do tonight. Allow us to issue the abatement order and start the clock for cleanup to get it in place.
Scott, can I ask the question of who the owner of the property is?
Sure. Yeah, definitely. That's public.
Okay,
Yeah, it's Michael Wynot,
okay,
and he is very well aware of the situations. He's actually working to formally evict the tenants for the damage caused to the building. And at this point, he's been cooperative, but he's not able to enter the home due to the existing tenant situation that they have going on there. And obviously it's not inhabitable, but they do have a number of belongings in there. So we're actually overseeing, with the help of Scott County Public Health, some of their personal items that they needed to take out of the home, such as prescription medication and some other items. But there's some things that are so infested that they really are just refuse. So we'll be working closely with Scott County Public Health to make sure that the biggest thing is we don't want things leaving the property sitting in the yard and then spreading cockroaches to adjacent properties and or getting brought to, whether it be in New Prague or outside of New Prague, other locations that could spread that infestation further, so.
Question for you now, if they tear that building down without killing all the cockroaches, does that mean they're all gonna jump over to the neighbors?
Nope, they have to eradicate that before they do any demolition, because that is exactly what would happen. Yep.
Ooh.
I'll make the motion if you guys want.
I have just one thing for clarification. In the third whereas of the resolution, are the last names of the tenants, is it Eastman and Eastment? Or is it supposed to be the same?
Eastman and Eastman.
Meant.
Yep,
Oh,
you're
okay. It
correct.
was so close that I wasn't sure
Yep.
if.
No T on the end there. Thank you, Maggie.
Okay, thank you.
I'll make the motion ordering the abatement of hazardous, building, conditions located at 703 Second Avenue, or Second Street Northeast.
I'll second.
I'm just gonna ask a couple more questions before I
Oh, sorry about
recognize
that.
that resolution. What kind of documentation do we have in our files at the city regarding the statements that are made in the resolution?
Yeah, we have full documentation, we have body cam footage, we have photos, which I actually could show you. I don't know if we wanna.
I don't know, I don't need to.
Over here tonight.
I say
just wanna-
yes, we opted to leave the photos out of the packet
Sure.
just due to the nature of the photos themselves. It's quite intense.
I just wanna make sure we have our ducks in a row, so we have documentation, because
Yes,
this
we
is
have.
something that's gonna be, that we're stating as a council, that we're stating that this is the fact, so I just wanna make sure.
Very well documented, like
We
I said, we had
actually
three
have that.
staff, the body cam, numerous photos, and, Scott County Public Health also, has followed up, been in the home, along with social services as well, prior to even our involvement.
So we have people that can sign affidavits to such.
Correct.
And that type of thing.
Yep.
And then, Scott, I guess I'm just trying to understand the 30-day period. Is that what's understood to be a reasonable time under the statute? Or why is 30 days picked?
Yeah, Bruce, that is following what's in the statute. That is considered reasonable. In fact, if activities don't occur prior to that 30-day period, after 20 days, we can move for a summary abatement and would, if we didn't see activities occurring, move the court to try to get this as close to 30 days as possible. So yes, that is a reasonable time period. It is what is required by statute.
Okay, so we couldn't do 10 days.
In this situation, no. If we're following the statute, you have to. However, if there was a serious health issue beyond, and this is serious, so don't get me wrong, but something, hazardous spill of some sort, we would move quicker than that and would find authority to do that. We are trying to follow as best we can the statute here to make sure we recoup any costs for the city. So the 30 days is reasonable in this situation.
And then I'm just trying to understand when we're talking about we have to do this and then also get the actual judgment. Does the judgment from the court actually happen on the 30th day? Or do we actually have to ask for the judgment after 30 days?
We would ask before the 30 days. We'd actually move and hope to get it as soon as we can at that 30-day time period.
So we would actually be able to take action at 30 days and actually start work?
Yeah. Likely, yes. And we've been able to do that in other situations where it's very close to the 30th day deadline. So that would be what we'd attempt to do. And most judges, when looking at this and looking at the supporting materials that staff has put together, I think would have a pretty easy determination to make the findings we need to sign the order.
I think just to reiterate what you just said, I think that the posture that we're wanting to take is to be able to take quicker action if possible, if we're trying to protect the other properties and other health issues in the area. So when we're talking about possibly things leaving the property, that would be something that we would probably ask, I would think, for you to take action quicker, like you said, if I understood you correctly.
Yeah, again, based on what staff has put together, we're following the procedure we should. There have been situations where cities have taken action to remedy a situation. It hasn't been to the level I'm seeing in this case. I mean, this is severe. It is very severe. There are concerns for adjacent properties. but it isn't a building that's collapsing, which we've taken quicker action in those situations. Now, if the council says find a way to move faster because of what we see or what we hear, we certainly will try to do that. But we're trying to follow the statute as necessary and would be the normal course of action for this type of situation.
I'm no expert or have great knowledge on infestation, but it just seems like there's other risk factors that might occur within that 30 days that might present problems to other areas, other neighbors.
Yeah, so right now, we believe in working with public health from Scott County. Lisa Brodsky, the director of Scott County Public Health, actually has noted that things are pretty well contained in there, other than when they had moved things out. So that's where the supervision, if there's anything else they need to get out of there, that is a necessity, like the prescription medications, that type of thing. They had some clothing that had to be toted up, and we had supervised that on Friday. They had a couple of things that they needed to move out. But other than when things have been moving in and moving out, there really hasn't been a movement of the cockroaches outside of the walls of the building at this point. And then, not to get into details about it too much, but another letter that we got from Scott County also gave some other information about cockroaches, and they start reproducing when it's 40 degrees and then start dying when it's about 30 degrees Fahrenheit. So we're kind of in that time frame where we've, we shouldn't have that big of an issue. I'll warm up tomorrow a little bit above that, but we believe everything's, pretty well contained in there. And anything leaving needs to be double bagged, binned, and inspected prior to moving off-site, so.
And I guess just along those same lines, it's the technicality, but it's, obtain a professional extermination service. And I'm not sure if, I just wondered, do we need to say that they're licensed, or I'm not sure what it takes to be professional. If you just get paid for something, that normally means you're professional. But do we have to, I guess where we're getting on,
Yeah,
someone
where-
that's qualified and actually does that kind of work, where it's not just a sideline thing because they kill mice for a living, that they can eradicate
And that's where we're
these.
gonna be leaning heavily on public health as the public health expert on this type of thing, obviously, police department, and then even Chad as our building official, we're not experts in infestations, by any means. We're experts in fighting crime and protecting the children that are in there, but as far as in the building, as far as, building inspection, but, that's where they've been very helpful, in the past few days on the actual eradication issues, and then even more so on some of the raw sewage spill that had occurred in the basement earlier, and some of the items left behind there, mold and whatnot. That's where they've been very helpful, from that end, on providing that guidance, and we're gonna lean heavily on them for their input on exactly like you're saying, what is a qualified, entity that can do that work? And I'm guessing they're gonna wanna come down and take a look at it and make sure their methods and.
Okay, would you feel that the abatement order is written in such a way that we're actually allowing those, that they are able to make the decision whether this is professional abatement or not, or
We're using them
extermination?
as our resource.
But does this document say that?
I think it's generically written enough, Scott, that we can use that as our resource, I would
Yeah,
believe.
So if
I
it's-
think, to answer Bruce's question directly, I think we have that authority to determine we're using a licensed professional entity, but I'll certainly look at it, and working with Ken, we can update it and even add something in there to make it even stronger, to make that reference. So we'll do that. That's fine.
Yeah, because after today, we don't have any, there's no requirement here. You don't have to get a permit to get an extermination person.
Not
So there's no contact with the city if they decide to go ahead and do that, right?
Anybody entering has to be accompanied by city personnel.
Yeah, the building is currently secured, locked with our own padlock at this point.
Right, but if Jim's extermination service comes in and says, I want to get in, you'll probably let him in because you're not going to check their professionalism.
Well, it all goes through, at this point, through Chad as a building official, who's posted it habitable at this point, even entering, so, yeah, I don't know, Scott, if you think we need something more specific, we
Well-
can do that, but ultimately, we're relying on public health
Put
to.
something more specific to address Bruce's concern, but no, I think staff has the ability to ask for credentials and should ask for credentials, and as Ken noted, we're working with the county on this. I think we'll have a pretty good idea that the entity that shows up is reputable.
Thank you. And I'm I apologize. I think, Rick, you made the motion, didn't you?
Yes, I did.
And Sean, you seconded?
Yes, I did.
Okay, motion's been made and second to approve the resolution 2111-1503. Any other questions, comments? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion passed. Thank you, Scott.
You're welcome.
Next item, Josh.
Yes, the next item is the Joint Powers Agreement for Prosecution Services. Just as a little history, back in 2011, the city formally entered into agreement with the other municipalities of Scott County for prosecution services. This rendition before you is really an update for a couple reasons. One, to add Credit River, which is now a formal city within Scott County, into the agreement, as well as to introduce a cost-sharing item a little bit later on in the agreement for the years that the expenses are exceeding the revenues as we're taking in. So just as kind of how that would work, the city would if for some reason the expenses for a given year go above what the revenues are, the city would be required to pay their proportion of the cases. And so, as an example, from 2017 to 2019, New Prague had about 5.31% of the cases, and so we would be required to pay 5.31% of that overage to make that about zero. So from that time period, if it was $100,000 that was required, we'd be on the hook then for $5,310. So if you've got any other questions, I can try to answer them. Other than that, it's basically the same agreement that we were part of before.
How are the revenues generated?
So the revenues from this are generated through the general fines that the city incurs. And so if I decide to speed home tonight and Jim pulls me over, my ticket would go towards paying the fees as required by the state, and then the fine that the city would collect would then be passed on to pay for these prosecution services.
Thank you.
Do all of our fees go to this kitty?
From what I understand, Jim might be a little bit better expert, but from what I understand, they do, yes.
So the city does not receive any fee income from,
It's an in and out. We get the fine money we're due from our issue of citations and court cases. We get that, and then we in turn write out a check for those same amounts back up to joint prosecution. And 2007, we started with joint.
So we started in 2007, but for whatever reason, our paperwork didn't get filed, so we didn't formally enter it into it until like 2011.
so even a parking violation, that income would go to there?
Yep, that was the agreement at that time, that, because initially we had line items for criminal prosecution. I don't believe it was a part of our police, or
Yep.
it might have been. So we had a line item for that in our budget, and that's what would go. And previously, it was a private company in town that we contracted with to do that. So when Joint started up and they talked to all the cities, the idea was to go to them. And initially, it started out as being able to, same process that they're kind of doing now, that they would invoice every case that happened, and based on the total cases and what was handled and the cost of that prosecution, you would pay that percentage on an invoice base every month. And that would come from that line item. Probably around 2011 then, they were looking at that and said, hey, rather than do this billing like this, they looked at previous years of how those numbers would run. And obviously Savage, Shakopee, Prior Lake had more cases than we did, so they paid their proportion much higher than we did. But they looked at that based on the income, or the fine monies, and also any prosecution costs that, as part of a sentence, the prosecutor could ask, hey, Judge, I would like you to entertain assessing a prosecution cost on this matter also. And the judge can make that part of the sentencing then. We would get that prosecution cost, and we would get any fine money. Fine monies are minimal, but it's still called the fine money. On an average ticket that's $185, that fine is actually $50. The rest are other funds and fees and that state legislatures wrote into, hey, we're gonna fund everything from everybody that gets a ticket. But yet, that money does come to us, and we would put that in as revenue, but still pay out our invoice all the time. In 2011, they looked at, hey, rather than do all that legwork, we'll take all the fine money and we'll take any prosecution costs that you get reimbursed from the courts. And if you send us that, we won't worry about any other invoicing. We'll just do it that way. I think, and looking at the history 5 years previous to that, some years were up, some were down. Overall, they were almost identical, that the costs averaged out very close. Or were slightly higher than what they were collecting. So all the cities agreed, yeah, we'll do that. So that's what was negotiated then. Now, I know the history is, the city, how the county attorney explained it to us was, every year he would go in there asking for his budget to get approved by the county board, and they would inquire, hey, what's the loss issue here? And he said, well, that's how it's set up, and after 3 years of taking on the board each year with that, he said, hey, I gotta come up with a way to offset this. And that's why they now move to, hey, we're gonna go back to billing for this, but just the overages that are not covered by fines and prosecution costs. And that's what they're dividing out now.
And so I guess for your guys' reference, we looked at it, we're just over $20,000. We thought is basically what our pass-through was for this year. And, I mean, while we haven't gone out for bid, I know Jim estimated that we'd probably be paying $25,000 to $30,000 if we were paying for these services on our own. So we are still paying less than if we were kind of doing this on our own, from our estimation.
Do we set any money aside I suppose the number's not a material number, that we're not setting extra money aside for a possible overage this year or next year, or?
So I don't believe we have for the 2022 budget.
Okay.
But it would probably be something that we'd kind of look into and make rough estimates, kind of off of the past 3 years and how the agreement says that we'd estimate out as to what we may want to set aside just in case.
I don't know if the number is meaningful, but as I understood what you described is if we're under, they keep it. If we're over, we pay it, which if you're playing poker is probably a challenging way to play.
And it may be something similar to, I know we talked about potentially with the fire pension fund, where we just set some aside and it's kind of a 1-year deal. And then we just kind of work off of that if we ever need to add to it or not, or there may be years where we don't dip into it at all.
Thank you. Any other questions about this? Entertain a motion to approve the joint powers agreement for prosecution services.
So moved.
Second.
Motion's been made and seconded to approve the agreement and authorize execution. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? None. Motion carries.
Next item, just kind of an update on the Rusty Spoke. I emailed you all on Friday, kind of an update of where we were at, just as a recap of that. Jim and I had talked to Scott to kind of inquire. I know Bruce had asked if we were under any required timelines by the state to pass this, and according to Scott Riggs, we were not under a timeline as long as we're working towards and progressing with an investigation at that point, that we're allowed to thoroughly do this investigation. At that point, Jim was going to reach out to the applicant just to kind of clarify a few things, and I know he was able to connect, it sounds like, so I will let him update from there.
Yeah, I spoke with Pauline, it was late this afternoon, just in regards to some of the information she did send back from the previous week, regarding, some of the financials, but, I also talked to her about, meeting her, calling her tomorrow and setting up a time sometime this week to meet with her and, just to kind of interview and talk about what her direction is and who's involved in the business and what's gonna take place. Just to clarify some of those things for that investigation. Pauline is also here. I was gonna call her tomorrow, morning sometime, to set up that time for that interview then. And she was gonna come down to do that.
Do you have any questions other than that at this time, I guess?
No, my concern is just that we understand what the requirements are and that we're not missing a step anywhere as far as the timeline, that there's no automatic things that happen just by delaying it.
And it didn't sound like there were from Scott, but he's someone that we're kind of keeping in constant touch with this to make sure that we are doing the investigation correctly.
And I think it's in, talking with Scott also, it is in the city's best interest to do their due diligence in what needs to be done prior to issuing a liquor license. And I think that's the only thing we want to do now is finish up this background check to make sure there are no disqualifiers in the liquor license statute regarding the issuance of a liquor license. And that's what we're working towards right now.
And I'll jump in. I'm still on. I waited for this item on the agenda, but yeah, we're following what's necessary. I have spoken with Josh and the chief, and we're proceeding as we need to and within all timelines. So we're fine. Whatever information the chief gathers, he can utilize and move this matter forward to a conclusion. But he does get adequate time to make that review, and that's where he's at right now.
From a technical standpoint, do we need to table it again, or is the fact that we tabled it in the last meeting suffice enough to do it, tabling it indefinitely?
That I'm not entirely sure. Do you know off the top of your head?
We didn't take it off the table, so it's still on there, so we should be good.
I think if you've done that, you should be appropriate. And in the end of the day, it probably doesn't matter because you're still dealing with it on the staff level. But no, you don't need to remove it from the table or table it further. You should be fine.
Thank you. Any other comments or questions? If not, next item.
Okay. Next item is a review and approval of the updated New Prague business subsidy policy. This went before the EDA here last week. I was unable to attend as I was sick that morning. But this particular policy, from my understanding, was last amended in 2012. And this is really a language cleanup with the addition of an exemption in Exhibit B and a requirement in Exhibit C. That exemption in Exhibit B is an exemption from the subsidy definition, basically saying that tax abatements granted under the stated section 469.1813 will not necessarily need to adhere or can be considered as a subsidy. And then the requirement is that any subsidy agreements that we enter into must have a specific section that addresses what happens if a recipient does not meet their agreement requirements. Both of those are required under current state statute. So if you have any questions, I can try to answer them.
I think at the EDA, I thought they said that we needed to have a hearing for the city too, or is it just the EDA to do a hearing?
We only were required to have one hearing.
Okay.
So by having it with the EDA, we are not required to have one
Okay.
hearing.
If there are no other questions, I entertain a motion to approve the amended and restated business policy.
So moved.
Is Is there a
I'll
second?
second.
Motion's been made and second to approve. Any other comments or questions? All those in favor say aye. Aye. Opposed? Motion carries.
And the last item I have, Mighty Ducks grant acceptance. This is actually an item that was before you back in May, I believe, where the state is trying to get R-22 refrigerant out of ice arenas. But because we are the landowners, we are the ones who have to apply for the grant, not necessarily the community center. So the community center had the work done for a total of $37,864,000, and they are requesting that the city apply for the reimbursement of $17,500 of that. The community center has already paid for the other, well, they paid for all of it, but their intention was not to ask for any other funds other than what this grant was providing. So I'm requesting approval of this and authorizing Bruce Wolf and myself to be able to sign for this grant receivable.
If there are no questions, I will make a motion to accept the 2020 Mighty Ducks Grant Program, and authorize Bruce and Joshua as the city manager to sign for the award.
Second.
Motion's been made and second. Any comments, questions? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries.
And that is all I have.
Any other items the staff has to bring up this evening? Matt, Jim, Ken? Nothing?
Just an update, today we had interviews for the position that, the officer that resigned in October. We interviewed 7 candidates. We listed the top 6 of them. We're looking to move as fast as possible to make an offer to initially one of them right now. I will be working on that in the next couple of days to see if we're able to land that person.
Jim, after that position is filled, are we still down any officers?
We're not down any officers, we're back to 10 full strength. But there was the plan about putting another one on in 2022 to get that officer trained prior to my leaving. And have enough time to have that officer go through field training so that by the time, or near the time I'm exiting, that they would be ready to go and be on the road already.
So, Katie then, in the transition plan, is an acting detective. Does she rotate in patrolling at all?
She doesn't rotate in patrol right now. Yeah, patrol is tight right now with our SRO being out in the schools and then 1 short in patrol. Right now, they're officially 2 short with
Okay.
that officer gone.
Okay,
So as we try and rotate, this new person, get them through field training as soon as possible, that'll help some of that. I'm also looking at trying to manage our schedule with the personnel that we have to a degree that maybe some of our detective and our sergeant, Applin, maybe utilize them for a shift here and there so that they're able to rotate through some of that. And maybe to 11 or 12-hour shifts to cover some time. Because of where things are at, even with vacations and comp time, we at times end up covering a 24-hour period with 2 12-hour shifts, to the degree that we have to pay, overtime for 2 hours for one person and overtime to the other shift for 2 hours just to get that covered, because we are short right now.
how soon do you think you'll move on that as far as starting to rotate Applin and?
In the next couple weeks, I'll look at trying to come up with a schedule that would manifest a better rotation like that.
And try to keep set schedules as well?
Yes, yep,
Okay. Thank you.
yep.
Josh, you have anything? Not anything else? Okay. Maggie?
Just in light of what we heard with the house at 703 Second Street, I'm just wondering if we want to resurrect our rental ordinance. I know that last year, things kind of got put on hold, but not only with this property, but there are some other properties in the city of New Prague that have had issues. They currently have issues. And so I would just like to resurrect that and hopefully move forward in enabling the city to be able to do more with those rental properties.
If I remember correctly, did we leave off at the point where we solicited individuals for this committee and we received those names and we didn't select
Yeah, we had
people?
advertised for we had advertised for basically a committee, like you're saying, that had a couple landlords, a couple of tenants, and then a couple of at-large, as well as, I believe we had a council representative on there. Scott Riggs, myself, Chad Lunder, and police were also gonna support that committee, and we just never appointed it. Literally, that was when we broke
Right.
for COVID and we weren't able to get together in person, so.
Yeah, I think
we
we
had them-
have the names and everything, but we
Yeah.
just didn't pick them.
We did not pick them. It
Okay.
was to come in front of you. I think that first meeting that we ended up meeting remotely, but we just put it on hold because
So
of
what do you think the next steps would be? Do we have to take time and discuss where we go in the direction again, or do we just pick up where we left off and maybe ask those same people if they're still interested and then decide, or?
Might not hurt to do a kind of a overview again, to get everybody on the same page. I know, the mayor obviously was not on the council at that point,
That's right.
so I don't think he has benefited a lot of that background information, but you'll probably put together some kind of a summary background for everybody and see if you wanna, obviously move forward again and, keep on the direction of having that committee, be that group to shepherd the process and kind of build that, support from kind of the grassroots, I guess, in a sense, even though we've got a bunch of background on it, but that was really where we had left it. We had a draft, I'd worked with Scott Riggs, and, I think it was really, wanted to go over it with that committee to see if there was issues for the landlords and the tenants that we could kind of flesh out and hopefully come to an agreement on before, hashing it out further at the council level. But, I don't know what those issues would be potentially from that committee, but that's where we left it.
Yeah, to me, it seemed like the project was a bigger project because it also had this enforcement,
Yep.
criminal enforcement kind of other leg to it, which to me, I need to understand a little bit more about that, but, and I don't want to suggest that we, kind of just go from thing to thing to thing, but weren't we also gonna kind of do a sit down with kind of setting some of our goals or something, or a kind of a thing in the first few months here of?
Yes, I know during, when we were kind of setting performance goals for myself, the council discussed at the beginning of the year, kind of sitting down and going over kind of goals and what we're envisioning for the next year, few years, both, I mean, it's from a city standpoint, and so, I know at that time, we'd briefly discussed the rental ordinance, and the general idea of the council was to table it at the time, but that was prior to this coming up, and, I mean, that's always able to be changed, so.
So do you think, Josh and Maggie, that we wait until January to set up a timeline and get that restarted, or should we be talking about the next meeting or two to get it jump started?
Well, I wouldn't mind having a summary of what's taken place, and where it is right now, and maybe to have that happen at our December, if it gives you enough time, have that at one of our December meetings. That way, when come January, we'll at least
On the same page?
have some thought, yeah.
It'd be easy enough to bring up where we have come from through the process now. That'd be easy to do.
Well, if the staff is okay with that, then I guess we would ask that you do that sometime in December.
Yeah, if you don't mind, we'll bring that to the second meeting in December, since the first meeting we'll have our truth and taxation hearing and various budget stuff, so.
Thank you.
Anything else?
No.
Yeah,
Oh, I'm going this way.
oops, sorry.
No, I have nothing, Bruce.
Rick?
Yeah, K-Check's having a senior and pre-senior fair. I went to it one year and, it was very informative. It's on, Wednesday, November 17th at the, ballroom, if anybody's interested. Like I say, there was a lot of vendors and stuff there and, it was very informative.
Is that an all-day event?
9 to noon.
9 to noon? Okay.
Any other comments or questions? Entertain a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
I heard a second, first and a second. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Thank you. And we have a free calendar, I think.
Pictures aren't very good.